Good afternoon on what is a warm, bright, and sunny day. It is Monday, the 26th of August. Yes, bank holiday Monday, and I'm in the reading nook with a nice cup of tea and a box to unbox. So let's have a look at what is in here. This arrived this week. In fact, this arrived this on Saturday. Knife into the tape. So find out where this end. No, I'll try and fight my way into this box. Because he's covered everything up, so it's difficult to see which end is meant to be open. So this is taking a little bit longer than normal because it's, there we go, that's it. No, still not. There we go. Finally. What? Loosen it back down. What I've got is Starfinder 2nd Edition Playtest Rulebook. Now, this is published by Paizo. It is essentially the playtest version of the new edition of science fiction role-playing game published by Paizo. That essentially that is the development of the Pathfinder role-playing game. So it's the same sort of like fantasy setting, as it were, but pushed thousands of years into the future into sort of like a science fiction stroke science fantasy setting. So test pilot the latest upgrade. The Starfinder 2nd Edition playtest rulebook brings Starfinder into a new age of compatibility. A Starfinder switches to using the same rules engine that powers the popular 2nd Edition of the Pathfinder role-playing game. Inside this book, you'll find 6 new base classes, including the Starfinder Classics, upgrading the Starfinder Classics to the new system, 10 new species, including gaseous Barathas, telepathic Lashuntas, energetic Skittimanders, and reptilian Vesk. Entirely new skills and feats intended for a science fiction setting, an overview of the deities that exist in the era of Starfinder, hundreds of weapons, spells, augmentations, magic items, and other options to outfit any character. This product requires Pathfinder Player Core and Pathfinder GM to use. This is not a standalone product. So, but it's also the other thing. It's a paperback, which in general rule books for Paizo are not. So there we've got the contents and credits page. Then we move on to essentially chapter introduction, a new era of Starfinder. This is setting out what the aim of the new 2nd edition, and it's the same thing that Paizo did with Pathfinder. They've released a playtest edition of the rules for the 2nd edition, prior to the 2nd edition, so that the publisher could gather feedback from the players. So once it's done that, it's going to give you the required products, book breakdown, playtest process. This is there for you to participate. And then we go into ancestries, including languages, regional languages, and so on. Common string. It's an odd place to start with languages, but there we go. But then we're into the particular ancestries themselves. Now, obviously, in previous editions, they would have been called race, but that has its own connotations and difficulties, of course. So we have ancestries, including Android, complete with a list of all the feats that it can take over the course of its career as it levels up. The same for the Barathu, the jellyfish-like Barathu. Of course, humans, essentially, which they set the humans set the baseline for all against which of the other, because essentially that's us. The essentially the Kasatha, and the Shunta, and Pathra, or is that Patra? And we have the Shirin. So lots of options just starting out, you know, play, and of course the Skittermander, which it's sort of like has been the signature creature for the Starfinder setting. Appeared in lots of releases for Free RPG Day from Paizo and the Reptilian Vesk. And the Isaki, very kind of rat or rodent like. Borani, so there's lots and lots of options. The Prismeni, then we have backgrounds, basically be applied to your each of these characters. And then the classes. We've got a quick overview of what those classes are, just are to give you an introduction to them. And then notes there on class playtesting. Classes are the Envoy, and this carries on into essentially Envoy feats. So each of the classes is going to be treated in this way, quite detailed, lots of things from which the player can choose from. And then we have a specific notes on playtesting the Envoy, before we move on to just the same for the Mystic. And I'm going to flip forward through each of these. You know, you don't need to necessarily see all of the tables here, because the layout is kind of the same. Again, you have a guide on how to playtest the Mystics. You've got the essentially all of the technical details, all of the elements that you need to play, and then you've got a guide on, well, here's how you play it, here's what you know, here's how you play it in this situation, because we want your feedback. Operative, Solarian, Soldier, and Witch Warper, chapter devoted to all the skills, because of course this is a science fiction setting, so it's going to be more technical. guide to how to use those skills, and again, how to playtest those skills. And then the same again for feats. These are all the general feats, all the feats that have sort of like appeared so far. Equipment, and that includes armor. With the guide here, it's basically the idea is covering things like donning and removing armor, environmental protection, armor stats, armor traits, as you would expect. Shields, as well, and then of course weapons. And then you've got the other thing you've got here is a very quick guide on essentially on how to make the mechanics. So essentially you've got a guide here: melee attack modifier, range attack modifier, melee damage roll, range damage roll. So very quick there, just for ease of reference. Then you've got discussion of all the weapon traits. And they're illustrated are the various weapons. Possible critical specialization effects before we move on to the weapon descriptions, including simple melee weapons, simple ranged weapons, up through the martial melee weapons and so on to the advanced melee and missile weapons. Now, these are not illustrated, of course, they don't need to be in a playtest document. We've also got all their stats. You do have some illustrations here, but they're essentially they're in their own piece of artwork rather than by the actual descriptions. Guide to grenades, missiles. You can upgrade your armor. Add in augmentations to your own to play a character, including biotech, like things like prehensile tile, climbing suckers, venom spur, dermal plating, so on, photosynthetic skin. And notably, because this is a science fantasy setting, there's magic items as well. You've got lists and descriptions of those. And these are going to be sort of like, these are not going to be standard items you would expect as a fantasy game per se. They are going to take account of this setting. So things like a programmer's plushie or a spell ampule or a spell gem, or spell chips, rather than necessarily a scroll. Tech gear, this is essentially all of the adventuring gear, survival gear, that sort of thing you're going to need, medical items. Then we've got the spell section, in both divine and arcane spells, followed by the spell descriptions. We've got a list there of the avatar abilities by deity. So those are sort of like some of the abilities that you're going to get for worshipping them, essentially, as a member of the clergy. You've got all the different spells that the characters can cast. Things like personal gravity, overheat, pocket vacuum. And these are things that you wouldn't necessarily think of seeing in a fantasy game, but in a science fantasy game, certainly. And there we've got the notes on playtesting spells. details of the deities that can be worshipped, the benefits of, of being one of their flock, the different domains, technology domain, that's really the new addition, only additional domain in there. Before we move on to environments, could be gravity, atmospheres, that sort of thing, starships and space stations, hazards, various things like laser webs, laser turrets, haunted cockpits as hazards, and then possible conditions. Before we have at the end the playtest Starfinder character sheet. Quite a lot, quite lengthy. Paizo credits page there, and then some adverts there at the back. So that then is the playtest document for Starfinder Second Edition, currently under playtest week for the new forthcoming edition. Well, I hope you enjoyed this unboxing in the Nook. If you did, then please do click on the like button down below. And if you've got any comments or feedback, I do appreciate you taking the time to post those. And lastly, if you want to be alerted to get more unboxings in the Nook, where you'll see me out here with box, it's a heavy box, and from which I will basically unbox a game, role-playing supplement, or in this case, a playtest document for Starfinder Second Edition, and talk about it to the best extent of my knowledge for roughly 10 minutes or so, all of course accompanied by a nice cup of tea. Then please do click on the subscribe button down below. Thanks again for watching another unboxing in the Nook. I will be back again soon with another one. Bye for now.